The sun had barely risen, yet the sky was painted with a pale orange glow that made the small village look as though it had been dipped in fire. Morning birds sang timidly, their melodies fragile against the heavy silence hanging over the dirt road. The young soldier stood there in his freshly pressed uniform, its fabric stiff and unfamiliar, carrying the scent of starch and new beginnings he had never asked for. He shifted his weight uneasily, his polished boots crunching against the gravel, each sound echoing like a drumbeat in his chest. Before him stood the woman who had been his entire world. His mother, her shawl wrapped tightly around her frail shoulders, clutched his arms as if she could anchor him to the earth. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from fear, a fear she could no longer hide. She was small, but the strength she had shown in raising him alone made her seem larger than life in his eyes. And now that strength seemed to falter, if only for a moment, as she stared at the child she had once cradled, now dressed as a man of war. The soldier lowered his gaze to her face, memorizing every wrinkle, every line carved by years of laughter, hardship, and sacrifice. Her eyes, once bright and filled with dreams for him, now shimmered with unshed tears. He wanted to wipe them away, to tell her he would be back soon, but the words felt hollow. Promises were fragile things in times of war, and he refused to give her one that fate might break. "Ma," he whispered, his voice cracking like a boy's, not the firm voice of a soldier he was expected to be. At the sound, her chest heaved, and a tear slipped free, tracing a slow path down her cheek. "My son," she murmured, pulling him closer until his face was pressed against her shoulder. The familiar scent of her shawl, smoke from the morning fire, and a faint trace of jasmine oil wrapped around him. It smelled like home, like comfort, like everything he was about to lose. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her neck. For a brief second, he wasn't a soldier. He was a child again, the little boy who once clung to her sorry when he scraped his knee, the teenager who sulked when she scolded him for staying out late, the young man who laughed with her over evening meals. All of it came rushing back, crashing over him like waves on a fragile shore. The world around them blurred. Villagers had gathered at a distance, silent witnesses to the farewell. Some stood with bowed heads, others looked on with pride or pity. But neither mother nor son noticed them. In that embrace, time froze and nothing mattered beyond the thundering of two aching hearts. The soldier squeezed her tighter, as if he could press his soul into hers, as if that one hug could protect him from bullets and bombs. "I'll be fine," he wanted to say, but his throat closed. His silence said more than words ever could. He was scared, too. His mother's voice trembled, yet carried a strength only mothers know. "Eat well, pray every night," and her voice broke and she pressed her lips to his hair. "And don't forget, my son, you always carry my heart with you, wherever you go." Those words carved themselves deep into him, as eternal as any prayer. He tightened his arms around her waist, unwilling to let go. For a fleeting instant he wished time would stop, that the sun would refuse to rise any further, that the truck waiting for him at the end of the road would vanish into dust, that war would forget his name. But time marched on, relentless. The chirping birds grew louder, the hum of an approaching engine throbbed in the distance. Each second was a thief, stealing what little they had left. The soldier pulled back slightly, just enough to see her face. Tears streaked down, but her lips curved into a shaky smile, a smile she forced for him, so he would not see her break. That smile hurt more than her tears. It was the smile of sacrifice, the same smile she had worn when she went hungry so he could eat, when she sewed late into the night so he could have new shoes, when she let him go though her heart begged him to stay. He lifted a hand and brushed her cheek gently, his thumb catching a tear. "You've always been strong for me," he said softly, "even now." She shook her head. "No, my son, it is you who must be strong now, for yourself, for me." Their eyes locked, and in that gaze was a lifetime, of lullabies and laughter, of scoldings and forgiveness, of warmth and love that words could never measure. A breeze swept through, rustling the trees lining the road. It carried the scent of earth and smoke, mingling with the metallic tang of his uniform buttons. He inhaled deeply, storing every fragment of this moment in his memory. He wanted to keep it alive in the trenches, in the deafening noise of gunfire, in the suffocating darkness of uncertainty. He tightened his arms around her once more, refusing to let the moment slip too soon. He felt her heartbeat against his chest, steady, strong, and achingly familiar. It reminded him of childhood nights when storms raged outside, and he slept curled beside her, listening to that same heartbeat lull him to safety. Now, as a man, he listened again, and it struck him that this might be the last time. That thought pierced deeper than any blade, yet he held on because this hug, this final embrace, was all that tethered him to the life he was leaving behind. The rumble of the truck grew louder. Villagers shifted uneasily. A rooster crowed somewhere in the distance, as if mocking the gravity of the moment with its simple morning call. His mother clung to him tighter, nails digging into his back through the fabric of his uniform. "Promise me," she whispered desperately, her voice muffled against his chest. "Promise me you'll come back." He closed his eyes, pain twisting his insides. A part of him wanted to nod to give her that fragile comfort, but another part, the soldier he was now, knew promises in war were dangerous lies. Still, when he opened his mouth, the words slipped out, heavy with love, heavier with fear. "I'll try, Ma. I'll try with everything I have." Her tears fell faster, soaking his collar. She pulled back and cupped his face in her hands, her palms warm against his skin. "That is enough," she whispered. "That is all a mother can ask." He leaned into her touch, savoring it. The lines of her hands were rough from years of work, yet soft in the way only a mother's touch could be. He wanted to stay like this forever, suspended in her embrace, where no war could reach him. But the engine roared closer, and reality forced itself between them. He hugged her one last time, longer, tighter, as though to imprint her very being into his soul. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, each one a silent prayer. When he finally loosened his arms, it felt like tearing himself apart. The horn of the military truck split through the air like a cruel reminder that time had run out. Its sound was harsh, unfeeling, a demand rather than a request. The soldier's heart sank with each reverberation. That mechanical roar was not just calling him to duty. It was tearing him away from the soft arms of his mother, from the only home he had ever known. He turned his head, reluctantly, toward the road where dust curled upward, stirred by the wheels of the approaching truck. Its green body loomed closer, heavy with the presence of other young men already inside, their faces pale but resolved, some staring out the windows with the same mixture of fear and pride that now filled him. The soldier felt his mother's fingers tighten around his wrist, trembling but desperate, as if she could delay fate just by holding on a little longer. He looked back at her, his chest constricting at the sight of her eyes that seemed to plead with him to stay, eyes that carried the unspoken question every mother whispers in silence. "Why must it be you?" He swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. His lips quivered, but he forced a faint smile. "I'll be all right," he said softly, though both knew those words were as fragile as glass. The truck stopped with a screech of brakes, and the soldier's name was called. The moment shattered like a glass jar dropped on stone. He pulled his mother into his arms once more, squeezing her tightly, memorizing the shape of her against him. The world grew small again, just the two of them pressed together, their hearts beating in sync. He breathed in her scent as though it could fill the hollow places inside him. "I love you, Ma," he whispered, his voice so low it was almost lost in the roar of the engine. Her body shook and her tears wet the fabric of his uniform. She didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. The depth of her love was in her silence, in the strength of her embrace, in the way she refused to let go until the soldier gently, painfully, pried himself free. With each step away from her, his boots felt heavier, dragging through the dirt as though the earth itself tried to hold him back. He climbed into the truck, his hand gripping the cold metal of the side rail, but before pulling himself up, he turned around. There she stood, his mother, her small frame trembling, her hands pressed tightly against her heart as though she could keep it from breaking. Her shawl fluttered in the breeze, her eyes locked onto his as if she could etch his face into her memory forever. For a moment the soldier hesitated, almost ready to run back to her arms, to abandon everything and surrender to the only love that had ever truly mattered. But duty pulled harder. He lifted his hand in a final salute, not the stiff, military kind, but a tender gesture of a son promising silently, "I will carry you with me." The truck lurched forward, and dust rose in thick clouds, swallowing the road, swallowing the boy who had always been her world. His mother ran a few steps forward instinctively, her arms half extended, before stopping, realizing she could not chase him into a place where mothers are not allowed to go. She stood still, watching until the blur of his figure was no longer visible, until the dust and distance carried him away completely. The road became quiet again, but the silence was different now. It was sharp, heavy, suffocating. The mother stood there long after the truck had disappeared, her tears soaking into the earth beneath her feet. Some villagers placed gentle hands on her shoulders, murmuring words of comfort, but they meant little. Her son had left, and nothing could fill the hollow space where his presence had been. That night the house was unbearably quiet. The small clay lamp flickered in the corner, casting shadows across the walls. She sat by the window, staring out at the empty road, as though expecting him to come running back, grinning, telling her it had all been a mistake. She had prepared dinner out of habit, perhaps, 2 plates of rice, lentils, and vegetables, though only one was touched. The other sat untouched, steam fatting into the cold night air. Her eyes wandered to his empty cot, neatly folded blanket at its end, pillow slightly indented from his head. She pressed her palm against it, closing her eyes, as though she could still feel the warmth of his presence. The memory of his last hug flooded her, the strength of his arms, the sound of his voice when he said, "I love you, Ma." That single moment had already become her most precious treasure, her shield against loneliness. Days turned into weeks. Letters arrived from the front, sometimes scribbled hurriedly in pencil, smudged by dirt and sweat. Each letter began with the same words, "I am safe, Ma. Do not worry." She read them over and over, her fingers tracing the shaky handwriting until the paper grew thin. She tucked them under her pillow, as if keeping them close could keep her son safe. But not every day brought a letter, and on those days her heart grew restless. She would walk to the edge of the village, scanning the horizon, waiting for the mail carrier. The villagers would whisper among themselves, sharing rumors of battles, victories, and losses. The mother, though, heard none of it. She listened only for her son's voice in the back of her mind, replaying his promise, "I'll try with everything I have." One evening a storm rolled in. Rain lashed against the roof, thunder shook the ground, and she sat by the fire clutching her shawl. Every crack of thunder reminded her of cannon fire, every flash of lightning of exploding shells. She covered her ears, whispering prayers, imagining her son out there in the chaos. In the quiet moments between thunderclaps, she could almost hear his laugh, his childhood voice calling out, "Ma, don't be afraid." She smiled faintly through her tears, holding on to that memory because it was all she had. Far away on a battlefield, the soldier crouched in a trench, mud clinging to his boots, his rifle heavy in his hands. Around him, chaos reigned, shouts of men, the whistle of shells, the sharp crack of gunfire. Fear gnawed at him, but through it all, he remembered her hug. He closed his eyes for a brief second and saw her standing on the road, shawl fluttering, hands over her heart. That memory steadied him, became a shield stronger than steel. Each time he thought he could not go on, he clung to the feel of her arms around him, the warmth of her tears against his collar, the whisper of her blessing in his ear. The last hug had become his anchor, his reminder of what he was fighting for. Not glory, not medals, but the chance to see his mother again, to walk down that dusty road and fall into her arms once more. And back in the village, his mother whispered prayers each night before sleep, pressing her hands together tightly, her lips murmuring his name with every breath. Her faith traveled across miles of distance, across gunfire and smoke, reaching him in the only way a mother's love can, silent, unseen but unbreakable. The dust of that farewell day never settled for her. It lingered in her memory, swirling endlessly, carrying the weight of a hug that would forever be both her greatest comfort and her deepest ache. And so, the story of a soldier's last hug to his mother was not just a goodbye. It was a bond stretched across distance and danger, a vow written not on paper but in two hearts beating far apart, one in a quiet village, the other on a battlefield where every breath was a gamble. That hug lived on, stronger than war, stronger than time, a reminder that love, once given, cannot be torn apart by even the harshest fate.